Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comments section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. The morning started like any other October day in Los Angeles. Crisp air tinged with the smell of distant wildfires, a sky the color of slate, and me, sweating through my sixth kata of the morning. My muscles burned as I held the stance, my katana extended in perfect alignment with my arm. I'm Kenji Nakamura, 24 years old, born and raised in the States, but with a heritage my grandfather never let me forget. Again, Oji-san instructed from his meditation cushion, his voice carrying the weight of stone. Your center is weak. I reset my position, exhaled, and began again. The steel of my blade caught the morning light filtering through the dojo windows. This sword wasn't a decorative piece hanging on some suburban wall. It was hand-forged, battle-ready, and sharper than most people could imagine. My grandfather watched with eyes that had seen more than they'd ever spoken of. A long scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, a remnant of a past he rarely discussed. He came to America in the 1970s, but brought with him traditions that stretched back centuries. Behind his quiet demeanor lay a reservoir of knowledge that he'd been pouring into me since I was old enough to stand. Better, he nodded. The closest thing to praise I'd get this morning. Now, 20 more. I was halfway through when my phone buzzed. Normally, I wouldn't dare check it during training, but something felt off. The buzz pattern was wrong. It was an emergency alert. Forgive me, Oji-san, I bowed slightly before checking the screen. Emergency alert. Stay indoors. Violent outbreak reported downtown, authorities responding. My grandfather raised an eyebrow at my frown. What troubles you? Some kind of emergency downtown, I replied, showing him the screen. Probably nothing, but I trailed off as more alerts flooded in. Texts from friends, news notifications, all reporting something strange happening. Videos showed chaotic streets, people running, police cars with flashing lights. Then my blood froze. My parents were downtown for a business meeting. I tried calling but got nothing. I need to go, I said, already moving to sheath my katana. Oji-san stood with a fluid grace that belied his 78 years. Take the truck, he said, tossing me the keys. I will prepare here. The drive into Palms, where my apartment sat, usually took 15 minutes from the dojo in Culver City. Today, it took 40. Venice Boulevard that should have been moving freely was clogged with cars. Horns blared. People stood outside their vehicles, gesturing angrily or talking in tight clusters. I weaved through side streets like Overland Avenue, my training giving me a patience most Angelenos never cultivated. As I neared my neighborhood near National Boulevard, the radio reports grew more dire. Multiple incidents of extreme violence reported across Los Angeles County. Officials are urging residents to stay indoors and avoid contact with anyone exhibiting aggressive or erratic behavior. My apartment building's parking lot was half empty, unusual for a weekday morning. The lobby was deserted. The elevator dinged with hollow emptiness as I rode to the 5th floor, my hand resting instinctively on the tanto blade I kept concealed under my jacket. Inside my apartment, I locked the door and drew the blinds before turning on the television. The news painted a picture that seemed ripped from horror movies. Civilians attacking other civilians, biting them, overwhelming police. The reporter, visibly shaken, described victims of attacks becoming violent themselves within minutes. It's like they lose all humanity, she said, her voice trembling. Their movements become stiff, aggressive. They attack without provocation. My mind worked methodically, processing, analyzing. This wasn't like any crisis I'd seen before. I packed efficiently: water, dried food, first aid kit, extra clothes. The katana went into its carrying case, designed to look like sports equipment to casual observers. My phone rang. Oji-san's name flashed on the screen. Kenji. His voice was tight, controlled. Do not come back to the dojo. What? Why? They are here. The way he said "they" made my skin crawl. 3 of them. They move wrongly, like broken puppets. I heard something crash in the background. "Oji-san, I will handle this. Go to the cabin. If I do not meet you by nightfall." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my training temporarily forgotten. Then discipline reasserted itself. The cabin was our rendezvous point for emergencies, a small structure in the Angeles National Forest near Big Tujunga Canyon, stocked and defensible. But I couldn't leave him. I grabbed my pack and weapons, then headed for the door. A scream from somewhere in the building made me freeze. It wasn't fear or surprise, it was pure agony, cut short with a gurgling finality that told me everything I needed to know. The elevator would be a death trap. I took the emergency stairs, moving silently down each flight, pausing to listen at every landing. The 4th floor was quiet. The 3rd had the sound of a door banging repeatedly. The 2nd had a woman sobbing behind a door. The ground floor lobby had changed in the 15 minutes since I'd come up. The glass doors at the entrance were cracked, smeared with what could only be blood. A body lay sprawled near the mailboxes. The building manager, Mr. Patel. His throat was torn open, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. I crossed the lobby in absolute silence, years of training guiding each step. Outside, the situation had deteriorated rapidly. Cars were abandoned in the middle of National Boulevard. An ambulance lay on its side at the intersection with Motor Avenue, lights still flashing. In the distance, smoke rose from multiple locations across West LA. I moved with purpose toward the parking garage, sticking to cover, avoiding open spaces. The katana remained in its case, but the tanto was now in my hand. Ready. 3 figures stumbled out from behind a tipped-over dumpster. They moved with a disjointed rhythm, as if their bodies had forgotten how to function properly. One was a woman in hospital scrubs, her uniform soaked in blood. The other 2 were men, one in a business suit, the other in a delivery uniform. Their heads swiveled toward me with an almost mechanical precision. Their faces, I'll never forget their faces. The skin was gray, taut against the bones. Their mouths hung open, teeth bared, stained crimson. But their eyes, completely devoid of consciousness, yet filled with primal intent. This was what Oji-san had seen at the dojo. They lurched forward with surprising speed, arms outstretched. I sidestepped the first, driving my tanto up through the base of his skull. The blade slid free as he collapsed. The other man grabbed for me, and I slashed across his eyes, then through his temple as he recoiled. The woman in scrubs charged, teeth snapping. I ducked under her grasp, swept her legs, and drove my heel into her face as she fell. The crack of her skull against the pavement confirmed she wouldn't rise again. 3 attackers, 3 kills. No hesitation. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. In true combat, there is no room for doubt. I retrieved my blade, wiped it clean, and continued to the garage. The truck was untouched. I loaded my gear and pulled out, navigating the cluttered streets with the precision Oji-san had drilled into me since I was old enough to see over the steering wheel. The route to the dojo took me past scenes straight from apocalyptic films. Outside a Ralph's on Westwood Boulevard, people fought over carts of food. A police officer fired into a crowd of attackers at the corner of Pico and Sepulveda, his shots precise until he was overwhelmed by sheer numbers. A Santa Monica Big Blue bus had crashed into a coffee bean on Olympic Boulevard, smoke pouring from its engine. Chaos was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. Whatever this was, disease, poison, something else entirely, it turned humans into predators with frightening speed. I reached Culver City, where the landscape changed from dense apartment complexes to more residential areas. The dojo sat on 2 acres of land off Jefferson Boulevard that my grandfather had purchased decades ago. A traditional wooden building surrounded by carefully maintained gardens and a small orchard of cherry trees. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, I noticed the front door standing open. This alone told me something was terribly wrong. Oji-san was meticulous about security. I approached with caution, tanto in one hand, katana now freed from its case and held in the other. The gardens showed signs of struggle. Broken branches disturbed gravel, a splash of dark liquid on the stone path. Inside the dojo, silence reigned. The training floor was immaculate as always, the weapons wall pristine. Nothing seemed disturbed until I spotted a single smear of blood on the polished wood floor, leading toward the living quarters in the back. "Oji-san?" I called softly, knowing that if he could answer, he would. The sliding door to his private room was partially open. I steeled myself before looking inside. My grandfather knelt in the center of the room in formal Caesar position. His breathing was labored, his normally immaculate GI stained with blood along one side. Before him on the tatami mat lay 3 bodies, the intruders he had mentioned on the phone. Each had been dispatched with ruthless efficiency. "Kenji." His voice was steady despite his obvious pain. "Close the door." I did as instructed, then knelt across from him, my eyes taking in the wound at his side. "You're hurt." "Yes." He made no attempt to minimize it. "One of them surprised me. I was careless." "Let me see it," I said, already reaching for the first aid kit in my pack. He shook his head. "No time. Listen carefully, Kenji. What we face is not merely violence or madness. These people, they are no longer people. They are vessels for something else." "A disease?" I asked, watching his face closely. "Perhaps, but it spreads quickly, the bite." He gestured to his side. "It burns like poison." My stomach clenched. "You were bitten." "Yes." The word fell between us like a stone. "We have perhaps an hour before I join them. Less, maybe." "No," I said, the discipline of a lifetime threatening to crack. "There must be something." "There is," he cut me off. "You must complete your training. Now. Today." Outside, sirens wailed. Somewhere in the distance, an explosion sent a plume of smoke into the sky. The world was unraveling, and here in this room, my grandfather was telling me that my training I'd devoted my life to, had reached its conclusion. "Oji-san, we need to treat your wound. Get you to a doctor." "There are no doctors for this, Kenji." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "I have watched the news. I have seen what happens. The time we have left should not be wasted on false hope." He reached behind him and produced a small wooden box, its surface polished by generations of hands. "This was to be given to you when your training was complete. I had thought that would be years from now. Fate has decided otherwise." He placed the box between us. Inside lay a folded cloth wrapped around an object I couldn't see. "Before we open this," he said, "you must understand what it means to be what our family has been for centuries. We are not just warriors or assassins. We are guardians of a threshold between order and chaos. When society falters, we remain. When laws fail, our code does not." My grandfather closed his eyes briefly, and I saw the pain flash across his features. When he opened them again, they were clear and focused. "The world as we knew it is ending, Kenji. What rises in its place will need those who understand both the old ways and the new. You must be that bridge." He pushed the box toward me. "Now open it. Your final test begins." I opened the box with hands steadier than my heart. Inside, wrapped in midnight blue cloth, lay a knife unlike any I'd seen before. Its blade was no longer than my palm, curved like a crescent moon, with simple characters etched along its gleaming surface. The handle was wrapped in worn leather, darkened by years of use. "This is my father's knife," my grandfather said, his voice growing weaker. "I've kept it all these years, hoping to pass it to you when your training was complete." I lifted it carefully. The knife felt impossibly light, yet perfectly balanced. "I'm afraid I won't be able to finish teaching you, Kenji," Oji-san continued. "The bite, it's spreading." I looked at the wound on his side. The skin around it had turned an angry red, veins darkening visibly even as we spoke. "There must be something we can do," I said, hating how helpless I felt. He shook his head. "I've seen the news reports. I know what happens." He pressed a piece of paper into my hand. "The Griffith Observatory. The emergency broadcasts mentioned it as an evacuation point. It's on high ground, defensible. Go there." "Not without you," I insisted. "Don't be foolish," he said, his voice suddenly sharp. I've taught you better than that. Assess the situation realistically. I cannot travel, and soon." He paused, pain flashing across his features. "Soon I will become dangerous to you." Outside, the sounds of chaos grew louder. An explosion somewhere in the city rattled the windows. The world was falling apart, and here in this room, my grandfather was telling me to leave him behind. "Take the truck," he continued. Take weapons, supplies. Help others if you can, but don't endanger yourself needlessly." His breathing became more labored. "I'm proud of what you've become, Kenji. Now go, before it's too late." I wanted to argue, to insist on staying, but the cold logic of survival, logic he had drilled into me for years, couldn't be denied. He was right. I needed to go now while I still could. "I understand, Oji-san," I said, bowing deeply to show my respect. "Thank you for everything you've taught me." His expression softened. "Remember your training. It will keep you alive." Those were the last words I heard from him as I gathered what I needed from the dojo. Weapons, supplies, the knife now secured in a sheath at my hip. Before leaving, I placed a blanket over his shoulders and set a glass of water within his reach. The sun was beginning its descent toward the Pacific as I stepped outside. Smoke from multiple fires across Los Angeles created a hazy dome over the city. The wail of sirens had diminished. Not a good sign. It meant fewer emergency responders were still functioning. The truck had 3/4 of a tank, enough to get me to Griffith Observatory if the roads weren't completely blocked. I was loading the last of the supplies when I heard glass breaking at the front of the dojo. I dropped low, moving silently to investigate. Through a window, I saw 3 men entering the main training area. They carried baseball bats and a crowbar. Looters, taking advantage of the chaos. I could have let them pass. The smart move would have been to remain hidden, to avoid confrontation. But they were heading toward the residential wing, toward my grandfather. I slipped through the side door, moving through the shadows until I positioned myself between them and my grandfather's room. "Get out," I said, stepping into their path, hand on my katana's hilt. The men spun, weapons raised. For a moment, no one moved. "Easy, man," the one with the crowbar said. "We're just looking for supplies. World's ending out there." "Not in here," I replied, my voice low. "Leave now." One of them, younger than the others with a red bandana around his neck, shifted nervously. "Come on, Diego. Let's go. This ain't worth it." The leader, Diego, wasn't so easily dissuaded. His eyes moved from me to the supplies I'd packed by the door, then to my hand on the sword hilt. 3 against 1, he said, sizing me up. "Bad odds for you." I didn't respond, didn't need to. My stance shifted slightly, a change invisible to untrained eyes, but one that any fighter would recognize as preparation to strike. Diego saw it. His eyes narrowed. He raised his crowbar and charged. What followed was brief and decisive. I sidestepped his wild swing, drawing my katana in one fluid motion. The blade flashed once, cutting through the air inches from his face. A warning. He stumbled back, falling into his companions. "Next time, I won't miss," I said, blade steady. "Now go." They scrambled backward, nearly tripping over each other in their haste to leave. I watched until they disappeared down the street, then returned to my preparations. The encounter had cost me valuable daylight. By the time I locked up the dojo and got into the truck, the sun was sinking behind the buildings to the west. Driving at night would be dangerous, but staying in the city seemed worse. The streets had transformed in the hours I'd spent with my grandfather. What had been merely chaotic was now apocalyptic. Abandoned cars blocked major intersections. Store windows were shattered, their contents looted. And the infected, they were everywhere. They wandered in groups along Venice Boulevard as I navigated around traffic snarls. Some moved with startling quickness, chasing anyone who caught their attention. Others seemed disoriented, shuffling in circles or standing motionless until something, a sound, a movement, sent them lurching forward. I kept the truck moving, avoiding main thoroughfares where possible. Washington Boulevard was a nightmare, gridlocked with abandoned vehicles. I caught glimpses of people huddled in their cars, too terrified to leave the imagined safety of locked doors, even as infected pounded on their windows. A woman flagged me down desperately at a corner, clutching a small child to her chest. I stopped, checking the surroundings for immediate threats before rolling down my window partway. "Please," she gasped, her face streaked with tears. "My son, he needs his medication. We were trying to reach the hospital, but the roads." "Get in," I said, unlocking the passenger door. "There's no help at the hospitals now. I'm heading to Griffith Observatory. Emergency broadcasts say it's an evacuation point." "Observatory?" She hesitated, looking around frantically. "I don't know." An infected businessman rounded the corner behind her, moving with that distinctive broken gait. The woman screamed as he charged. I leaped from the truck, drawing my katana in one smooth motion. The blade connected with the infected's neck as he reached for the woman, separating head from body in a clean arc. "Get in the truck," I repeated more urgently. "Now." She didn't need to be told a third time. She scrambled into the passenger seat, clutching her son, who looked about 5 or 6 years old. I got back behind the wheel and accelerated away from the scene. "I'm Elena," she said, once her breathing steadied. "This is Matteo. Thank you for saving us." "Kenji," I replied simply, focusing on navigating through a particularly tricky section where 3 cars had collided, blocking most of the road. "You're good with that sword," she observed, glancing at my katana, now resting between us. "I've had training." "Looks like more than just training," she said. "Where did you learn to, She trailed off, gesturing vaguely. "My grandfather. He taught me since I was a child." I didn't elaborate further, and she didn't press. I turned north on Highland Avenue, aiming for Los Feliz Boulevard that would take us toward the observatory. The streets became more congested the further north we traveled, forcing me onto side streets and even sidewalks in places. In a residential area near Franklin Avenue, we came upon a pickup truck with a flat tire. A young couple was frantically trying to change it, constantly looking over their shoulders. Infected were visible at both ends of the street, gradually moving closer. I pulled up alongside. "Need help?" The man, around 30 with glasses and a UCLA sweatshirt, looked up with relief. "Oh, thank God. We've been stuck here for 20 minutes. They're getting closer." I surveyed the situation quickly. "There's no time to fix the tire. Grab what you need and get in the truck." They hesitated only briefly before grabbing backpacks from their vehicle. The woman with short dark hair and a leather jacket helped her limping partner toward my truck. "I'm Ryan," the man said as they climbed into the bed of the pickup. "This is Amber. She twisted her ankle trying to run from those things." "I'm heading to Griffith Observatory," I explained. "Emergency broadcasts say it's an evacuation point." "We heard the same thing," Amber said, wincing as she settled herself. "We were trying to get there when the tire blew." "Stay low," I instructed. "I'll get you there." We continued north, making slow progress. The roads grew more congested as we neared Los Feliz Boulevard. I had to stop several times to clear infected from our path, my katana moving with practiced precision. After one such stop, as I was wiping my blade clean, Elena touched my arm hesitantly. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "Really?" I looked at her, considering how much to share. "My grandfather came from Japan. He believed in preserving traditional skills, kendo, iaido, ninjutsu. I trained with him my whole life." "Like a real ninja?" Matteo spoke for the first time, eyes wide despite his obvious exhaustion. I smiled slightly. "Something like that." "Is that why you're so calm?" Elena asked. "Most people are panicking, but you seem focused." "Panic gets you killed," I replied, repeating one of my grandfather's most frequent lessons. "Focus keeps you alive." We were nearing Los Feliz Boulevard when we encountered a new obstacle, a police barricade blocking the entire street. Officers in tactical gear stood guard, weapons ready. I stopped the truck, signaling Ryan and Amber to stay down in the truck bed. A police officer approached, hand on his sidearm. "Road's closed," he said tersely. "Turn around." "We're heading to Griffith Observatory," I explained. Emergency broadcasts listed it as an evacuation point. The officer's expression shifted. "You heard right, but this route's compromised. We had a breach an hour ago, lost 3 officers. Is there another way?" He hesitated, then pointed west. "Take Western up to Franklin, then connect to Vermont. It's longer, but the National Guard has that route secured." He glanced at my passengers. "That woman looks injured." "Twisted ankle," I said. "We're trying to reach safety." The officer made a decision. "I'll call ahead. Let them know you're coming. Good luck." I thanked him and carefully turned the truck around. The detour would add precious minutes to our journey, with daylight fading fast. Western Avenue was clearer than I expected, evidence of the police having worked to keep it open. We made good time until we reached Franklin, where a crowd of people on foot slowed our progress. They walked in the same direction we were heading, carrying whatever possessions they could. Families with children, elderly assisted by younger adults, all moving with the determined gait of refugees. "They're all heading to the observatory too," Elena observed. I nodded, troubled by the implications. How many people could the evacuation point hold? Would we find safety, or just another kind of danger? We inched forward through the crowd. Some people shouted at us, demanding rides, pounding on the truck's panels. I kept moving, trying to maintain enough speed to discourage anyone from jumping on while not hitting those in our path. As we turned onto Vermont Avenue, the road began to slope upward toward the hills. The crowd thinned slightly, the incline challenging for those on foot. Ahead I could see flashing lights, police and military vehicles establishing another checkpoint. The National Guard had set up a control point at the intersection of Vermont and the Observatory Road. Soldiers checked people before allowing them to proceed up the hill. The process was slow, deliberate, each person being screened for signs of infection. I pulled up to the checkpoint, rolling down my window as a guard officer approached. "LAPD called ahead about us," I explained. The officer nodded. "Pull over to that inspection point." He pointed to an area where several military medics were conducting examinations. "Everyone needs to be screened before proceeding to the observatory." I parked where indicated. Elena clutched Mateo tightly as we exited the vehicle. Ryan helped Amber down from the truck bed, supporting her weight as she hobbled forward. "What are they checking for?" Elena asked quietly. "Bites, scratches, any sign you might be infected," I replied. Her eyes widened in fear. "Will they separate families?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but stay close to me." The screening was thorough but efficient. Medics in partial protective gear checked each person for wounds or symptoms, taking temperatures and asking basic questions. One of them, a young woman with close-cropped blonde hair, approached us. "Any injuries, bites, scratches?" she asked, already examining Mateo with practiced movements. "We're clean," I assured her. "I've been careful." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with her inspection of the boy and his mother. When she turned to me, her eyes lingered on the katana at my side. "That's an unusual choice of weapon." "It's effective," I replied simply. "I'd say so." She stepped back. "You're clear to proceed." She moved on to examine Ryan and Amber, paying special attention to Amber's ankle. "Just a sprain," she confirmed. "I'll wrap it for you." When she finished, we joined the stream of people being directed up the winding road toward the observatory. Griffith Observatory sat atop the hill like a beacon in the gathering darkness, its distinctive domes silhouetted against the evening sky. Floodlights illuminated the approach, powered by generators that hummed in the background. Military vehicles formed a perimeter around the main buildings, with armed personnel stationed at regular intervals. As we got closer, I could see that the main lawn and parking areas had been transformed into a makeshift refugee camp. Hundreds of people huddled in groups, some with emergency blankets, others with whatever they'd managed to bring. Medical tents had been erected near the main building, with long lines of injured waiting for treatment. A harried-looking official with a clipboard directed us toward an area designated for new arrivals. "Name, number in your party, and any special needs," he recited mechanically. "Kenji Nakamura with Elena and Mateo Diaz plus Ryan and Amber Chen," I supplied, grouping us together. Amber has a sprained ankle. The official made some notes, barely glancing up. Medical is overwhelmed with serious cases. Basic first aid is available near the west entrance. He pointed toward the observatory's main building. Find space wherever you can. Food distribution starts in an hour. We made our way to the indicated area, passing groups of shell-shocked people sitting on the ground or leaning against walls. Their expressions reflected a common trauma, the sudden collapse of everything familiar, everything safe. "What happens now?" Elena asked quietly, holding Matteo close. I scanned our surroundings, assessing defensive positions, exit routes, potential threats, habits ingrained by years of training. "We wait, see if the authorities have a plan beyond basic containment." "Do you think they do?" I thought about the chaos we'd witnessed, the speed with which society had unraveled in mere hours. "I hope so." Ryan helped Amber find a place to sit against a wall, then approached me. "Thank you," he said earnestly. "We wouldn't have made it without you." I nodded acknowledgement. "Stay together. Keep aware of your surroundings." As night fell fully, the observatory transformed in the darkness. Floodlights cast harsh shadows across the grounds, while the dome of the planetarium glowed with subdued blue light. From our vantage point, we could see much of Los Angeles spread out below, sections dark from power outages, others burning, creating an apocalyptic patchwork across the city. Inside the main building, authorities had established a command center. Military personnel coordinated with police and emergency services, their voices carrying an edge of controlled urgency. Announcements periodically came over a loudspeaker system, directing new arrivals or calling for people with medical training to assist. Elena and Matteo huddled with other families under emergency blankets, the mother keeping her son distracted with quiet stories. Ryan had managed to find some bandages and was properly wrapping Amber's ankle. I remained standing, preferring to keep watch. A National Guard lieutenant approached me after observing my vigilance for several minutes. "You military?" he asked. I shook my head. "Civilian." His eyes traveled to my katana. "That's some hardware for a civilian." "Family tradition," I replied simply. He seemed to make a decision. "We could use another pair of trained eyes on the perimeter. Interested?" I considered briefly. Staying active, being useful. It aligned with everything my grandfather had taught me. "Show me where." The lieutenant led me to the eastern edge of the observatory grounds, where a makeshift barrier of vehicles and portable fencing had been established. "We've had increasing activity from the infected over the past 2 hours," he explained. "They seem drawn to the lights, the noise." Looking beyond the barrier, I could see them, dark figures moving among the trees and brush of the hillside. Some wandered aimlessly, while others seemed to fixate on the lights of the observatory, stumbling uphill with terrible purpose. "How many?" I asked. "Too many," he replied grimly. "We are rotating personnel on 2-hour shifts, conserving ammunition, using melee weapons when possible." He gestured to my sword. "Hence my interest in your skills." I nodded, understanding the strategy. "I can help." He introduced me to the current perimeter team, a mix of military personnel and civilian volunteers with relevant experience. An ex-Marine named Rodriguez was leading the group, coordinating their movements with practiced efficiency. "Our primary objective is containment," Rodriguez explained. "Keep them outside the barrier, engage only when necessary, preserve ammunition at all costs." He looked pointedly at my katana. "Though in your case, that's less of a concern." For the next hour, I patrolled my assigned section of the perimeter, dispatching the occasional infected that got too close. My training allowed me to move silently, to strike with precision, to conserve energy, all critical skills in this new reality. As my watch progressed, I noticed a disturbing pattern. The infected were becoming more concentrated in certain areas, as if responding to some stimulus I couldn't perceive. Their movements, while still uncoordinated individually, created a collective pressure against our defenses. I approached Rodriguez with my observations. "They're clustering on the northeastern approach," I reported. "The barrier there is weaker, just portable fencing and a single vehicle." He frowned, studying the area I'd indicated. You're right. It's a vulnerability. He keyed his radio. Command, this is Perimeter 1. Requesting reinforcement on northeastern quadrant. Increased activity observed. The radio crackled. Negative, Perimeter 1. All available personnel committed to western approach. Maintain current positions. Rodriguez cursed under his breath. They're stretched too thin. He turned to me. Keep an eye on that section. If they breach, sound the alarm immediately. I returned to my patrol, but kept circling back to the northeastern barrier. The concentration of infected there was definitely increasing. Dozens now, pressing against the fencing, their collective weight causing it to bend slightly. A sound from the darkness beyond caught my attention. Different from the usual moans and shuffling of the infected, more purposeful. I focused, using the listening techniques my grandfather had taught me to filter out background noise. Footsteps, human footsteps, running, and behind them, the faster patter of pursuing infected. I moved to the edge of the barrier, straining to see into the darkness. A figure burst from the trees, a man in torn clothing, running full tilt toward the observatory. Behind him, at least 20 infected gave chase, moving with frightening speed. "Help!" the man screamed, seeing the lights of our perimeter. "For God's sake, help me!" I made a split-second decision, vaulting over the barrier and sprinting toward him, katana drawn. At the same moment, the infected nearest the fence seemed to sense the commotion, their attention shifting. They began pushing harder against the barrier, metal groaning under their combined weight. I reached the fleeing man just as the fastest of his pursuers closed in. My blade moved in swift arcs, cutting down the first 3 infected in rapid succession. "Run for the barrier," I instructed him. "Straight ahead." He staggered forward, gasping for breath. I covered his retreat, blade flashing in the dim light as more infected approached. We were nearly at the perimeter when a sharp crack echoed through the night, the sound of metal giving way. The northeastern barrier had failed. Infected poured through the gap, their moans rising to a collective howl as they scented new prey. Alarms blared across the observatory grounds. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio, calling all perimeter teams to the breach. I pushed the exhausted man toward the remaining section of barrier. "Go! Find shelter inside the building!" He stumbled through to safety as I turned to face the horde now spreading across the perimeter. Rodriguez and his team arrived, forming a defensive line with whatever weapons they had. Batons, knives, a few precious firearms. "Fall back to secondary positions," Rodriguez ordered. Controlled withdrawal. But I saw something he didn't. Families hurrying toward the main building, directly in the path the infected would take if our line broke. Elena and Mateo were among them, along with Ryan helping the limping Amber. There was no time for a tactical retreat, no time for anything but immediate action. I stepped forward, placing myself between the advancing horde and the evacuation route. My grandfather's final lesson echoed in my mind. Remember your training. It will keep you alive. The katana felt like an extension of my arm as I centered myself, feet planted firmly on the ground. Behind me, I heard Rodriguez shouting orders. Personnel racing to establish a new defensive line. In front of me, dozens of infected surged forward, their hollow eyes fixed on the fleeing humans behind me. This was it, my final test. Everything my grandfather had taught me, every hour of training, every lesson in focus and discipline had prepared me for this moment. I raised my blade as the first wave reached me, my mind clear, my purpose absolute. The world had ended today, but I refused to let it take these people, these strangers who had somehow become my responsibility. Not while I still stood. The horde closed in, and my katana began to sing.